Now, hundreds of commandos on the streets, a squad of stern guards and cheering fans lining the route. Just another leg of the Olympic torch relay. Today, the flame is in Malaysia, where authorities aren't taking any chances. Dan Rivers is in the capital of Kuala Lumpur with more. Dan, I understand that the relay is just about getting underway right now.
It's just starting right now, Sasha. Right behind me, the torch will begin its relay through the city, about 16 kilometres in total, ending up at the Petronas Towers, one of the big landmarks here, the Twin Towers here in Kuala Lumpur. There have been a couple of incidents involving people protesting for the Tibetan cause who were sort of manhandled away either by security officials or by photographers as they were sort of set upon by Chinese students here. I'm just going to talk to a couple of tourists here, Shanna and Brad Kessler. You saw what happened a minute ago. Just describe to me what went on.
Yeah, well, there was a girl who was wearing a shirt that said Free Tibet all over it, and she was just holding up a sign saying Free Tibet. She wasn't yelling, was she?
She wasn't yelling Free Tibet at all, but she had the sign, and as soon as spectators saw what she was doing, they just immediately mobbed her and started to crowd around her. They had little flags and were hitting her a little bit, and she just kind of got pushed off to the side until I think somebody from the press, maybe a photographer, kind of pulled her away from it all. But it was a little crazy. They definitely got in her face and were not happy with what they saw.
They were really angry. They were still yelling at her and following them. And
who was setting around her with the flag?
They were all Chinese. They were yelling in Chinese. And some of them had shirts that had it said like "One Dream." What does those shirts say?
One Dream, One Nation. It
had Tibet on it in Taiwan, like as far as China, and it said "One China, One Dream, One Country." And
they were definitely not happy, and they're all Chinese. They had flags, and they're kind of hitting her with it.
You're here obviously on holiday as tourists. What do you make of the atmosphere here, of the situation here?
I didn't think that it was going to be that big of a deal, and especially since there's only one protest that I've seen that was kind of contesting the whole Tibet situation. But right now, it seems pretty normal. It seems everyone's excited about the Olympics and whatnot, except for that one incident. They got her out of her pretty quickly. So it was definitely pretty interesting what happened.
Thank you very much indeed for talking to us. So a couple of small incidents, and we were also getting reports that another couple of pro-Tibetan protesters were escorted away, really as much for their own safety and perhaps not to take the kind of gloss off today's event. Fairly small-scale stuff compared to London and Paris and San Francisco, it must be said. But down here, this is Independence Square. I'd say that the number of Chinese flags here is outnumbering Malaysian flags by about 10 to 1. There are a huge number of what appear to be Chinese students who've come down here, Chinese students studying in Malaysia, and we understand that the embassy has done its part to try and get as many students down here as possible to wave the flag from their part to celebrate the Olympics. But obviously, it's not been totally without incident. Sasha?
And Dan, from the size of the security operation which is being talked about there, it does seem pretty clear that the authorities don't want anything to actually derail this torch progression through the city.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the Malaysian authorities are desperate that this goes smoothly as it did in Bangkok. In Bangkok there were protests, but basically the torch was allowed to go unimpeded. They're hoping to repeat that here. They've got police en route. But everyone is trying to play this down. Everyone you talk to here is trying to play down the threat of any sort of violence, of any sort of confrontation. I must stress those two incidents that I talked about were very, very minor, really, and really could almost be put down to, maybe people getting a bit over exuberant in chanting their slogans and so on. So it's been pretty small beer so far, the protest. Really just 3 that we know of, people that came down here to make their point about Tibet. But it must be said, looking around, there aren't that many people here. The people that are here seem to be mostly Chinese students or people who are in some way involved with the ceremony. There don't seem to be that many members of the public here celebrating the torch, but perhaps there'll be more crowds as it leaves Independence Square and moves through the rest of the city.
OK, Dan, thank you very much. That's our Dan Rivers talking to us from Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia.